Okay, so today's topic is the force velocity curve. So me and Coach George already kind of had a discussion on this, so I want to kind of have you guys, again, if you've never heard of this, have you ever heard of the
I've
force
heard of
velocity?
it.
Heard of it?
Yeah.
How about you, Wilson?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're familiar with it? So what do you know about the force velocity curve? What pops in your head when you hear that? Nothing? We'll get back to you. So what pops to your head when you hear force velocity curve?
Does that one increase the other?
Mm-hmm.
That's
So there's a relationship,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Whether it's a positive, negative, there's some type of relationship between how much force an athlete can produce and at what speeds can the athlete produce those forces, right? So George, what pops to your head when you hear that?
Sprinting.
Okay, so sprinters. Okay, so there's a major relationship with what goes on here with how fast somebody can run / sprint, right? What else? Anything else? Or anything that popped in your head, Wilson? No? So let me break it down. So basically, in a sense, when you see this, just know that there's an inverse relationship between force and velocity. So take, for example, if my max deadlift is 500 pounds, when I lift that weight, is that bar going to move fast or slow? So you
Slow.
Slow, what do you think?
slow.
Slow, right? So 500 pound deadlift, 1 rep max, that bar speed is going to move slow. Is the force going to be high or low? High, right? It's my max. That's as high as much as I can lift. So if you're talking about, let's just say a back squat. Okay, 1 rep max is going to be all the way up here. So it's going to be really high on the force, very low on the velocity component. Okay, so that bar is going to move extremely slow, but my body is going to produce as much force to lift that bar as much as I can. Because my 1 rep max, that's everything I got. Now let's go on this side. So velocity. So give me an example, George, of what's something that an exercise that's really high velocity. You just said it. Sprinting, right? Okay. So let's put sprinting here. Yeah. So sprinting is going to be pretty much the most explosive, the one with the highest velocity out of any exercise. Now, if I add a 10-pound sled or a prowler to your sprint, what happens here?
Force goes up.
Force goes up. What happens to this?
Velocity goes down.
Okay, so think of this as being body weight. Now, if I add 10 pounds, say you're dragging 10 pounds, now we move this way. So now we're going still high velocity, but we're moving to the left because now we're going a little bit more towards the force. I'm going to be running a little bit slower. Okay, so you have to look at this as kind of like a spectrum. Okay, so if I add more load, higher force, but slower velocity. So then something like this might be a back squat, maybe a 5 rep max. Okay, so still got high force, but now the bar's moving a little bit faster. Okay, so now we have to, again, kind of look at this. Now that we kind of know where we're at on the spectrum, is taking a look at sports. So most sports, let's go, George, soccer. Is that more of a high velocity type movements in the sport or higher force? Velocity. Like, give me an example of, in the sport of soccer, what's a movement that has a really high velocity? Sprinting, right? What else? What do you do to
dive?
Diving, right? A goalie, you're taking a dive. You're not going to dive slow. You're going to dive extremely fast, right? What other movements in the sport? So kicking a ball, right? So when I kick a ball, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to load it, and I'm going to try to really rip that ball with really high velocity, okay? So let's take a look at baseball. So Wilson, give me some examples of the sport of baseball, some movements with high velocity.
Pitching.
Throwing a baseball, right? You're not going to toss the ball like this. You're going to try to throw as hard as you can if you're throwing, say, a fastball. Or if you're getting a grounder, you're going to try to throw as fast as you can to first base to get the person out. What other movement in baseball is high velocity?
Swing.
Swinging a baseball bat, right? Same exact thing. We're not going to swing slow. We're trying to really put a lot of high emphasis on velocity rather than force, because that bat doesn't weigh that much, so we don't need that much force, right? Now let's take a look at golf. Golf is a perfect example. Is if I have a golf athlete, not to say that this is not important. So we're not saying that the golf athletes shouldn't get stronger, because they should. It can help reduce injuries, but it's also going to help with their overall power. Okay? So, but golf, you're swinging a club that doesn't weigh much. So high velocity is that movement is going to come in pretty quickly, right? So now we have to add movements that not so much mimic it, but we want to be moving that athlete pretty quick if we're doing like a rotational throw and things like that. Now let's take a look at something that's really, really high force. So kind of up your alley, Coach Wilson. Give an example of what a sport, I mean, it's not like a mainstream sport, but it's a sport that has a really, really high force component and not such a high velocity.
Powerlifting?
Powerlifting, right? Deadlift. All you're trying to do on the competition in powerlifting is lift the most amount of weight for your weight class. They don't measure how fast the bar's moving. They're not measuring the speed at which you're producing the force. They just want to know how much weight is coming off the ground, say on a deadlift, right? So not to say, again, it's not saying that we shouldn't train this, but a lot of the training is going to take place here. Okay, so now let's kind of relate it to sports, right? So now let's look at some factors that influence power, okay? And all we're talking about power is force times velocity. Okay? So for us to get more powerful, we need both force and velocity. Now, where we focus our training can depend on what phase of training we're in, what the athlete specifically needs, and what the sport demands, right? So not to say one's more important every single time. It could just be like, hey, maybe they're in the off season, we're working more on the force side. But as they get closer to in season or preseason, we're probably speeding some things up, okay? So now let's focus on some things that influence power. So besides force and velocity, are there any other things from like a performance standpoint that can influence power? How do you increase power? What can you get? So what can we work on, again, trying to get more specific in the weight room to become more powerful?
Just gaining weight.
So
that increased power.
strength, right? I mean, is one of the biggest things is get stronger, right? So when we get stronger, we increase force, right? What other factors can we do to increase power? Opposite of that.
Movement efficiency.
So movement efficiency, yeah. So think of sprinting. We had the discussion is making sure you're applying the force in the right direction, right? So a lot of times people focus, and again, even as a strength coach, and I'm biased to it, we focus a lot on the strength component rather than kind of the movement efficiency where we're talking, okay, so if we're sprinting and we're in the phase of acceleration, we're mainly pushing back. So we're pushing force, we're trying to deliver that force horizontally rather than vertically, right? We're not jumping, we're trying to move forward, right? So again, movement, efficiency, okay. What else? Yeah, so I'll give you guys, so speed, just speed in general. So we get faster, again, the opposite of this, so we're focused here. We get faster, we're gonna increase the velocity component. So just moving, not so much the efficiency, I consider efficiency more from like a biomechanics sample, where we're putting the force in, now just increasing your speed. Okay? So this could be using a medicine ball that weighs 3 pounds for a baseball athlete and doing some type of side toss where we're moving pretty quickly, right? So we got velocity, force. Okay, so now let's go a little bit more specific with athletes in general. Okay, so one of the things that kind of me and Coach George were talking about the other day, and I've been doing a little bit more research on, is we have to, in order for us to, as strength coaches and performance coaches, in order for us to get an athlete better, we have to make sure that we're training that athlete in a specific manner to what they actually need, right? So what that means is, let's just say, a jumper. Okay, so let's just say a volleyball player. So athlete A, volleyball player. Okay, sport of volleyball. So volleyball involves a lot of what?
Jumping.
Jumping. What else?
Diving.
Diving. What else?
Swinging.
Swinging. What else? The opposite of what you said. Jumping.
Landing.
landing. Okay, so again, a lot of ACL tears. What happens is bad landing